Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the Supply Chain Dialogues podcast, where we will be diving into the procurement, supply chain, and operations management world. We got insights for you into new, old, and even outdated truths, and hopefully that will make you more successful in your job by expanding your knowledge of solutions which are out there. My name is Daniel Helmig, your host for the show. I ran supply chains, procurements, and operations globally in 5 industries for more years than I care to remember.
And I'm Amy, the AI-generated co-host voice of the show. I will ask the questions and provide from time to time facts and figures provided from my other AI siblings.
Thank you, Amy, and let's dive into the show. The name of this episode is called Significantly Optimizing Cash Flow and Working Capital by Changing the Focus on Supplier Payments, DPO. This is the second part of what originally was a blog mini-series on cash flow optimization. If you have missed the first part on inventory, you are in for a real treat if you stop here and first listen to part 1. We believe that while finance must report on cash flow, operations should own the metric. Now, in this episode, we talk about the cash that you graciously lend to your suppliers, captured in Days Payable Outstanding, or DPO. So let's have some fun with the topic, shall we? I was lucky to have learned cash flow management in the supply chain from the ground up. I will always be grateful to the folks at Ford who taught me. We often joked that the company was actually an accounting firm with a large car park.
The story behind Daniel's joke is that Henry Ford II hired World War veterans like Robert McNamara and a group of other Army Air Force officers to work for him in the late 1940s. Many of these whiz kids later became Ford presidents, and some, like Robert, even got into politics. They helped reform the firm with modern planning, organization, and financial control systems that are still in effect today. Many say that this was one of the reasons Ford did not have to be bailed out during the subprime financial crisis in 2008.
In the 1940s, these accounting and planning processes were swell, as they would have said at that point in time, and rather new. Would you not assume then, therefore, that this knowledge, which is standard curriculum in most business schools still today, has permeated every last corner of most companies in the last 80 years? But what happened in these decades is that the lessons only sunk in on the finance function side. The translation was lost to the rest of the organizations. At Ford, the whiz kids transformed Ford operation in conjunction with how the books were done better. Even when I was a young apprentice in that firm, you could feel in each function, business, and region where I've been sent to that they were part of a big, brilliant machine, and that their, and ultimately as well my own work, mattered to keep the company succeeding financially. In this mini-series on cash flow management, we argue that a change away from the myopic finance focus offers hard cash benefits for anyone willing to try it. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for the finance profession.
In contemporary business settings, financial analysts, accountants, and investment bankers possess valuable skills and knowledge, and are often among the most intelligent professionals. It is worth noting, however, that prior to the 1990s, many of these individuals from the best universities would have pursued prestigious careers in medicine, scientific research, or innovative ventures. But, after Bretton Woods and many more political follies, capital markets have grown to an unprecedented scale, representing currently 7 times the size of the global gross domestic product. Tendency rising.
So who can blame these smart folks for flocking into this ever-expanding field and make a more than decent buck? Still, in my view, it is a sad, and for all of us as well, a dangerous situation. Now back to cash flow. Most of it is a direct function of the value chain. Hence, we argue that the functions along the value chain are in charge of improving the cash flow by actually doing something, while the finance folks focus on what they do best on their side. In the value chain, external materials and services purchased are the largest cost block in most product-based companies. Hence, the cash flow improvement leverage is significant. We'll talk about what it means a little bit later. Unlike cash trapped in inventory, which is fully in the responsibility of a company, DPO management needs, since there are two parties involved, two to tango. Now, what does it take for companies to start dancing with each other? On the surface, you have two dancers that want to dance, but each pulls seemingly in different direction. As I said, it looks a lot like tango. As we are interested in optimizing our payment terms, which drive DPO, our suppliers want to improve their DSO, their Days Sales Outstanding. For many firms, this seems to be a zero-sum game in which the party with the biggest buyer or supplier power wins. This is, however, just a tiny part of supply chain reality. More often than not, cash is burned unnecessarily since, they give you a couple of examples, negotiated payment terms are lost in translation between purchasing and accounts payable, payment terms are missing or not followed through, local or even global benchmarks and trends on payment terms are not known or tracked, contracts and escalation paths are not standardized, accounts payable has no electronic data interchange with the supply base since procurement has not put it into the contracts as an order qualifier. A factor is as well payment term complexity and the creativity of buyers involved in that. The most terms I've counted in one company was 467, I still remember the number. Even the best buyers or accountants have no chance to manage this. And then finally, suppliers request shorter payment terms with your company since they do not trust you. And the reason for that is very simple. They are seldom paid on time due to complex invoice routing and approval processes in your company. I'm sure that you will recognize one or the other, or maybe all points, in your own company. Now, we know a bit more about the background of the often dire situation of DPO in most companies. The simple questions that Amy will now pose are meant to help you to understand whether you might have a DPO opportunity and hence can do something significant for your cash flow. In your head, try to answer them with a yes or no. And please note that you will recognize some repeats from the first part of the series, since in cash flow management there are often similar solutions that apply across all three levels.
Do you have any cash conversion cycle metrics linked to the compensation of business management?
As mentioned in the first podcast on cash flow, we argue that it takes a whole village rather than just the great finance folks. Incentivization of all board members equally on improving cash flow on CCC is over time a great measure to improve companies' health.
Did your payment terms policy change in the last 5 years, considering the massive change in interest rates and inflation in most global markets?
Today, it is much more expensive to get money on the capital markets than, for example, 3 years ago. Inflation did increase, banks did fold, and there is even talk about a non-Western monetary system. Well, let's hope that this is not the case. In this environment, quick cash flow is king to both you and your supplier. Are your payment term policies, assuming that you have any, still up to date? If not, now is the time to brush them off and tighten them, but in combination with instruments like supplier financing schemes that alleviate the financial strain for your own supply base. Remember, they are part of your extended enterprise, although they have different shareholders.
Do you have minimum thresholds for procurement contracts with regard to payment terms, and are they tracked?
Many colleagues avert the look into their eyes if you ask about standard payment terms. I understand that feeling because I know how much time it takes to get it implemented, the amount of people you, inside and outside of the company, have to talk with, the changes to general terms and conditions, and then the only applause you might get for a minute or two is from the treasury team, while everyone else is raising external cash and talking to investors instead of inviting you to lunch in the canteen and maybe a coffee. All jokes aside, buyers as well as suppliers need to know what payment terms are okay for the company and which are not. Buyers need to understand from what thresholds on they need to bother about payment terms dilution and how to deal with a supplier that is asking for a medium-sized wander around payment terms. I give you a hint. Escalation for the first time and finding another supplier for the second time, if possible. This overall is functional hygiene, so I recommend that you just do it.
Do you have standard payment terms across all businesses, considering local differences?
Depending in which country you are headquartered as a company, your employees have grown up in your local culture, which includes as well what your culture regards as decent commercial practices, including payment terms. Often these practices are defined even in the local code of law. This is all good and well. It, however, becomes an issue if your buyers, and as well salespeople selling across borders, look at every commercial transaction through their local glasses. There is no common denominator for commercial practices when it comes to payment terms. Most regions, often even countries, perceive right and wrong differently. I'll give you an example. Germany, France, and small to medium-sized businesses in India look for payment terms between 50 to 60 days. In the rest of India, Italy, and a few other countries, payment terms can go up to 100, sometimes even 120 days. So it is different in most countries. Sound complex? Not really. If you define it once, and you can search it on the internet, it's not really that difficult, you can define the payment terms for country and region once and work with it.
If you are interested in the background of these peculiar differences, check out the studies of Professor Geert Hofstede and his website hofstedeinsights.com. He was a Dutch social psychologist who is best known for his research on cross-cultural communication and management. His seminal work, The Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions Theory, identified 6 cultural dimensions that are used to compare cultures and understand differences in values, behaviors, and attitudes. Now to the next question. Do you measure the difference between contractual payment terms and actual payments performed by your accounts payable department?
Sometimes the wonderful systems we have are not as wonderful in real life. Case in point are, for example, the different modules in ERP systems for quote-to-contract versus order-to-pay processes. In other words, the materials or procurement module versus the accounts payable module. Between them, up to 10 different payment terms related fields can be input by buyers and accountants for just one supplier. They can differ based on hierarchy, for example, overall payment terms of the company, supplier payment terms, contractual payment terms, and then there is as well something which is called special payment terms. So what does it mean? Well, if a buyer negotiates, for example, a large deal and with that negotiates long payment terms, it can still easily happen that accounts payable still pays the supplier on the normal supplier-based payment terms because that is dictated by their system. I have seen deltas between procurement and accounting payment terms versus actuals by up to 20 days across the whole spend. What it means actually in cash flow, I will tell you later. This can be fixed with diligent cross-functional work between procurement and accounts payable. But for the record, procurement leads because they are the owner of the contractual relationship with suppliers and accounts payable implements. You can do this by yourself or ask nearly every procurement consultancy to help you. This is a run-of-the-mill action for them.
Do you have standard guidance on your company supplier webpage for payment terms? Do you even have a supplier webpage, and can it be found easily?
This is a bugbear of mine since many years. Take a look at most company websites and try to find the pages where communication happens with suppliers. Good luck. Suppliers, or as we should call them, the extended enterprise, if run well, represent often up to 70% of the cost of a company, and they can be great with regard to innovation and sustainability. However, the company webpage often doesn't even list the connection. My advice is, if you're a CPO, fight for it. And if you're in marketing, realize that a first-class corporate website is more than a vehicle to communicate to customers and investors. Now, back to the topic of payment terms on your websites. I mentioned before general terms and conditions. While in this podcast, we will not have the focus on contractual opportunities to make your life actually quite easier. Let's just keep it at that. Have your payment terms for your supply base listed on your company's webpage for suppliers and share it with them in your RFQs and other materials, like for example contracts and what have you. It makes the life of your buyers much easier, takes away the superfluous part of negotiations on this topic. Make it clear. If you like to work with us, these are the terms. Or the saying is, it's my way or the highway, I guess.
To further professionalize the hedging process, do you provide at least monthly automated reports to the Treasury Department about the outstanding payments by currency and quarter?
I've seen some of the most sophisticated tools created by Treasury folks to predict the outflow of cash over any given period. And as I mentioned earlier, there are very smart people in finance with a clear knack for numbers. When we then provided them with an extract of the open orders and the respective attributed payment terms by country, currency, etc., the need for this crystal balling was over. They could toss the crystal balls into the trash can, since they had the facts in their hands for the largest cash outflow. Modeling on top of that, then the personal cost is child play. With this, hedging was much more precise and normally as well less significant, since natural hedging areas were easily identifiable.
Are your buyers trained in dealing with payment terms and understand it as a normal part of supplier contract negotiation, assuming you actually have contracts with suppliers?
Amy's point on whether or not you even have contracts is a different kettle of fish altogether. I was amazed to see that just 10 years ago, I came across a multi-billion Western Hemisphere company that still was doing contracts, mainly based on handshakes. Anyway, you should have in your smorgasbord of excellent trainings one lecture of 2 to 3 hours with a role play to teach buyers of how to get the payment terms that your company wants. That's it. Very simple. So that's about all there is with regard to DPO and questions that you can answer in your head. If you answered yes to most questions, great. You have your DPO under control. Congratulations. Do not listen any further. Better to focus on other topics like talking with your significant other or a colleague, do a long walk in the park or woods, or get your tax return ready if it's this time of the year. If you, however, did not know or answered several questions with a no, you can make your company more stable and cash rich. To understand the size of the price, please use the following simple steps to establish the gap and the target. Well, first you divide your total external annual spend, normally somewhere between 50 to 70% of your revenue, depending on producing industry. You divide it by 220, which are the normal work days. Now you have more or less the daily DPO cash flow. Second, now you set your payment terms average target. And now third, you subtract your current payment term status from your target status and multiply it by the daily DPO cash flow. And voila, you have your opportunity or the size of the price. To give you a feel of what we're talking about here, for a company with a $10 billion spend, the cash improvement can be 200 to 500 million in the first step, which equals only 5 to 10 days delta. If there is still someone listening from finance or with a financial reporting background, you know that DPO has a few more input factors. Still, what I talk about is good enough to engage the procurement department and make a real contribution to cash flow. The full GAAP DPO definition, including full accounts payable, cost of goods sold, inventory, etc., I leave up to you to calculate and then use for the books. Okay, now we have established that we are not talking peanuts here, and I hope that you already start thinking about the potential companies you might want to acquire, R&D projects you like to kick off, or shareholders you like to please with this additional freed up money. But before this will happen, we need to implement the tighter DPO process. Hence, Here is a list of activities and roles and responsibilities that are needed to be executed so that you get the benefits. Let's start with a time plan as always. It takes not that long, 9 to 12 months. If done right, already in the next shareholder meeting next year, you can then boast your successes on cash flow and think about combining it with the other areas like inventory and DSO. The board sponsor should be the COO if you have one, or one of the business presidents. Try to stay away from the CFO. Again, all good. This is an operation topic. That's the reason why I'm saying it. Nothing against CPOs as such. Who is the lead for the project? Should be the head of procurement and the head of accounting, together, joined at the hip. Designing the blueprint, you need to build first the current state, and we talked about some of the areas where you find golden nuggets. Then define the size of the prize and how your future state should look like. It should take you 2 months. Think speed as in SpaceX, not NASA. Now on the project setup, it's the same as normal. Weekly task force with clear objectives, monthly reporting on board level by board sponsor, based on clear output KPIs, like for example DPO trend, number of suppliers negotiated, total spend and countries covered overall in percentage. Now, how do we sustain success? We need to establish training courses for procurement and accounting, video trainings for suppliers on our webpage, develop procedures on working level, update general terms and conditions, and. There is a whole set of topics that need to be accomplished there. But I'm pretty sure that you will get that done. When we talk about digitalization and automation opportunity, there is a high opportunity here. With a bit of effort, no contractual payment term should be missed in accounts payable. No late payment by supplier should go unnoticed. Average payment terms by order should match average invoice terms. No contract should be signed outside of the payment terms parameter set, etc., etc. Software solutions such as Power BI, Tableau, Looker, Sisense, QuickSense, and SAP Analytics Cloud can be used to control, while process mining can help the detection of loopholes in the procure-to-pay process. When we look at risk, overall this is rather low. While there will be always a few disgruntled suppliers that are used to your leniency in the past, most will appreciate clear guidance as well for their own cash flow planning. Now let's talk about what it will cost us to implement it. Overall, it is rather minimal. The licenses and training on the software mentioned above are dwarfed by the level you get with improved cash flow guidance. And who knows, maybe the processes and systems learned here are as well used for topics such as customer payment behavior, revenue patterns, and product portfolio margin analysis. The sky's the limit here. Do we have watch-outs? There will be pushbacks, both from purchasing and accounting. A detailed analysis often reveals that purchasing leverages payment terms versus cost reduction, which should be the exception, not the rule. On the other hand, accounting operational metrics are often linked to their payment on time assessment. Often these do not align with the actual contractual terms. So, how do we deal with that? What is the mitigation? My recommendation is forget the past. And no killer questions such as, how could that happen? Whether you like it or not, it did happen. And does so in most companies. So rather help these departments to improve and then celebrate with them the success. Thank you for listening to episode 9 of the Supply Chain Dialogues podcast. This was part 2 of a mini-series on cash flow optimization. The next podcast will be on DSO, which means Days Sales Outstanding.
A big thank you as well from me. Stay safe, stay bold, and start your bold actions by subscribing to our podcast on our website or on Apple Podcasts.
So goodbye, stay healthy, and hopefully until the next time, goodbye.